Okay, so we are going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to thank all of our admitted students and family members for coming and spending a little bit of time this afternoon with me. My name is Laura Stratton and I'm the Director of Admission, and I'm really excited to be speaking today with Jennifer Armstrong, who is our Associate Dean of Faculty here at Scripps. And she's going to talk about some of the academic aspects of being at Scripps. And I am going to turn it over to Jennifer. We're going to set this up mostly as a Q&A. So I'll be asking Jennifer some questions. It's going to be a conversation. And then we are really eager to know what your questions are as attendees to this webinar. So at the bottom of the Zoom webinar, there is a question and answer functionality. So please just go ahead and let us know your questions there. And we will get to as many of them as we possibly can. And any that we don't get to, we're happy to pick up on Instagram, or you can email Jennifer about at a later date. So let's go ahead and get started. Jennifer, if you wouldn't mind just to tell the attendees a little bit more about you and your role at Scripps.
I would love to. Hello, everybody. Congratulations. It is wonderful to be here speaking to the admitted Scripps students. Let's see, a little bit about me. So I grew up in New Mexico. I love very, very spicy chili of all kinds. I went to New Mexico State, and then I landed in California for graduate school at the Salk Institute. I did my postdoc in beautiful Santa Cruz, and I have been here at Scripps College since 2003, about 17 years. So I'm a professor of biology. I study fruit flies for obvious reasons, and because they're amazing. And well, that's another topic. And what I've been doing for the last year and a half is I am the Associate Dean of Faculty. And my job in that role is really to support all the students in all of their academic endeavors. And so that can involve fellowships, scholarships, it involves summer research programs, it involves classes, it just involves anything that's academic related. I support that work.
Wonderful. Well, I know that we are going to be getting into all kinds of conversations about research and fellowships and interdisciplinary learning. And I just wanted to start there. So interdisciplinary learning is a really important part of the Scripps experience. We talk about it a lot in the admission process and also once our students are on campus. But for our admitted students and their families, what does interdisciplinary academics actually mean? And how does that play out in the core curriculum, but also beyond the 3-semester core in the humanities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think interdisciplinary, it means different things to different people. And it's something that I really did not appreciate until I came to Scripps. Mm-hmm. So as I said, I went to New Mexico State, which is a wonderful school. It isn't a liberal arts college. And so it really came down to me really working here as a professor, teaching in the core program until I I appreciated what interdisciplinary means. And really what it means is it's a new way to think. And it's a new way to think in teams. It's a way to think with people who come at problems from completely different points of view. It causes you to grow in tremendous ways. It forces you out of your assumptions and your biases, and it's really empowering and freeing. So I got to teach in Core 1, which a few years ago, which was a wonderful experience. I made some lifelong friends among the faculty. And I think one of the things that's really important to talk about is that we ask our students to approach their academics through an interdisciplinary lens, meaning that they're not just taking one approach to answering questions. At the same time, we ask the same things of our faculty. We ask that our faculty branch out, get out of their little narrow hole of their discipline. If you're working on your PhD, you know more and more and more about less and less and less. And so really we ask that our faculty take a step back and look around and say, what's going on outside of the laboratory, outside of my world, outside of the library, whatever it is. And it becomes very freeing, amazing. And so when I taught in Core 1, it was several years ago, and it was a different topic. So I'll talk a little bit about the Core 1 that you would take. And that's the topic of which is truth. And I believe you had a session on Core 1 that maybe some of you were able to go to. Truth is incredibly timely right now. It's going to be an exciting year. It's an election year. And it's something that the entire class will go through together as a community. Truth is being led by a mathematician professor. It involves professors from English, anthropology, French, history. There's a chemist. And they've all come together to form a syllabus to get at the idea of truth from every possible point of view. And the students will wrangle and wrestle with ideas in new ways. I think it begins with Galileo. It talks about everything, Salem witch trials. It's amazing. I also want to talk a little bit about Core 2. So I'm very fortunate in that I get to teach in Core 2. It's a non-science class. It's called Constructions of Disability, and I co-teach it with Kim Drake, who is a writing professor. And she and I thought maybe at first we would never be able to even communicate, because how could a biologist talk to a writing professor? But it turns out we approach problems in really the similar ways. We both ask a student to come up with an idea, a thesis. We ask that they support it with evidence. It turned out that our teaching styles were incredibly similar, even though we were coming at problems from completely different perspectives. And so this class really asks, where does disability reside? Does it reside within the person? Does it reside within society? What does it mean to identify as disabled? It's one of the classes that when students enter it, they think it's one thing and they pop out at the other end thinking it's something completely different. Let's see, what else can I talk about? Oh, Keck Science. So Keck Science offers interdisciplinary courses in the introductory years. So we have courses that combine biology and chemistry. We're talking about courses that combine biology and physics. Because our science department is integrated with biologists, chemists, physicists, environmental analysis, and neuroscientists, they just approach science automatically from an interdisciplinary point of view. I think that's everything I'll say for the moment about interdisciplinarity. I think it'll come up again when we talk about research.
Awesome. So a lot of our students express an interest in doing research. It actually is our first question is about research. So bravo to the first person who got the question in. So we know that students have an interest in doing research during college. How do Scripps students engage in research, and when do they do it?
It's a great question, Laura. The answer is when they want. And so we have students that engage in research the first year that they're at Scripps, their first summer that they're at Scripps, and then we have other students that don't engage in research until they do their senior thesis. It depends on the student's interests and what they want. Students will do research at Scripps, in the Keck Science department at Scripps, or off campus, all over. We have a lot of summer programs that they'll apply to, and those could be research that's done on campus or off campus in collaboration with Scripps faculty or with other faculty. We really emphasize, again, interdisciplinarity in our research. The funding that I oversee for summer research is through funds that ask that our students do interdisciplinary research. So we currently have a Mellon grant that funds humanities-based interdisciplinary research. We also have an ongoing fund that funds students to do interdisciplinary research in a variety of topics. And so we're again asking that students don't just take one narrow path and one approach, but that they're actually open to thinking about coming at problems from different angles. We celebrate our students' research in a variety of ways. Keck Science has a symposium for its research students. That's the first Friday, the first week of classes, every afternoon. Mark your calendars. And I put on a research tea in the middle of September. So I think they know about tea. Do they know about the tea? Okay, so the tea is Wednesday afternoons. So one of those Wednesday afternoons in the middle of September, all of the summer research students have posters that they put up, and we have like a grand poster session when all the students come and they eat their carrots and their cookies and things and talk about, what did you do for your summer research? Tell me about your poster. Super fun. And then lastly, we have, of course, thesis. So a lot of the research that students do feeds into their thesis. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes a student will do a summer research project after their sophomore year, and it'll be on a completely different topic than their thesis, which is fabulous because then they've had multiple experiences. So the answer is it depends, because all of our students choose to do what's really in their natural path.
So I I have a question actually from our Q&A that I thought I would just kind of pop in because it seems really relevant to what we're talking about, which is, can you give any examples of like humanities research that students have done or things that maybe are outside of the physical sciences that students have engaged in maybe in the last few summers, or things that you remember from that research tea that we hold every September?
Yeah, so sometimes students will analyze literature in new and interesting ways. Sometimes they will create works of their own. They'll create poetry. There was one student who did a really novel project, which actually had some science in it, but she was looking at the rescuing phenomenon, like what does it mean to be a rescuer? And so there are these psychological tests that you can take to see how likely it is you'd be a rescuer or not. But she also paired this with a close reading and analysis of readings that involved Lancelot. And so it was this really interesting research project that combined her interest in the classics and her interest in neurobiology. We had another student who went to France, and she would hand people a lump of clay. And she said, just play with the clay. Don't do anything with it. Just play with it. And then she would ask them questions about what does home mean to you? And the person would start talking about what home meant to them as they're just kind of goofing around with the clay. And then by the end of the conversation, they looked down and they had formed something that related to their home. Maybe it was an important cup or a mug or a figure of something. And it was a really powerful and moving experience. And she said she didn't know if it would work the first time. And when it worked the first time, it was just so powerful. So she wrote about how art really makes us, really is able to access memories that we may not know we really have. And every time she talks about this project, I cry. She talked about it at Parents' Weekend, and I had to go up and talk after her, and I was just crying. It was amazing.
It's always so hard when we have to go and talk after our students because Scripps students are so dynamic and interesting. In the admission world, we always just say, put the students in front of everyone. They're the ones who are doing all this great work. So I can imagine that. I actually remember that Lancelot poster at that tea. I also was so moved by it. And another one during that session I remember was the student who did some research about restorative justice and apartheid in South Africa and had spent the summer there, and just the narratives. So thinking about social science and history research, there are some really, really neat things that our students will be doing over the summer in the summertime to do that type of research. So it's funny that we remember that same tea. I love that. Another part of your job is working with Scripps students who are interested in fellowships. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the fellowship process looks like, and maybe how our identity as a women's liberal arts college affects your work in that area?
Yeah. So first I can back up a little bit and talk about what a fellowship is, because that's a question I get a lot from students. And so fellowship is money that somebody's going to give you to do your passion. And so this is really good money because it frees you up to do what you want to do. And it provides resources for you to travel, to follow your passion in ways that are really, really unique. And so we have fellowships that are within Scripps. We have fellowships that are not within Scripps that you can apply for. And my son just brought me food. Can you pick them up? Thank you. Told. Anyway,
this is our Zoom life, Jennifer. It is our Zoom life.
Food, which was very nice of him. And so we have projects at Scripps that will allow you, fellowships at Scripps that will allow you to create a grassroots project focused on social justice, for example. And we just have a student who got one of these fellowships, and she's going to work with a local organization that is an after-school place where at-risk youth like foster kids and other youth go, and she's going to basically help them start their own entrepreneurial businesses. And so she got funding to do that through the Strauss Foundation like Sunday. So because we're a small school, I have the lovely, lovely task of being able to work with students on an individual basis. So if a student is interested in understanding, is there a fellowship out there appropriate for me? Then they make an appointment with me and we talk about, what is your major? What are your interests? What do you want to do in the summer? What do you want to do after you graduate? There are so many fellowships available, such as Fulbrights, Watsons, Napier's, that is a local fellowship run by a group called Pilgrim Place. A student just got one of those to go to the Philippines and work on public health, and which she has 15 months to do. So she'll do it when this is all over. And so because of our individualized nature, we can really find something that matches and works with a particular student. So one thing I do always point out to students, though, is that many of these are hard to get. And so it's important to be mindful as you're working towards a fellowship that maybe has a 20% acceptance rate, or a 10% acceptance rate, or a 2% acceptance rate, that it's really important to focus on the process, and the process matters. As you're doing this, you're working on personal statements, you're thinking about yourself, you're reflecting what is important to you, what mark do you want to make on the world, and that process is hugely helpful and beneficial. It shapes students, it changes their majors, it changes their post-graduation plans. If they don't get the fellowship they're applying for, they can use that essay towards graduate school. They can use it towards a different fellowship. This is a really fun time of year, Laura, because this is when all of the Fulbright announcements come out. And so we just heard this week the last on the list of our students were getting their Fulbright. So we have students that are going to go to the Philippines for Fulbright, to Kazakhstan, to Spain, to Germany. We're super, super excited. You mentioned the restorative justice poster. There was another student who just got a Watson Fellowship, which is a very prestigious fellowship, and she's going to look at alternative forms of punishment and restorative justice as she travels around the world for a year. And once the coronavirus settles down and she can travel around the world. You asked about Scripps being a women's college. I think one of the very special things about being a women's college is as you're writing for these fellowships and talking about your plans and talking about who you are, you learn to sort of be able to bring your best self forward in a way that's bold. You have to get across to somebody who you don't know, who's in a room with 10 other people, reading stacks and stacks of these, who you are and why they should give this funding to you and why you're going to make a difference in the world. And that can be a very hard thing to do. And I think I feel very privileged to be able to help our students learn how to do that and be their own best self advocates. Yeah.
That's wonderful. So in addition to fellowships, what else do Scripps students do after graduation? And how do you think that a Scripps education really prepares students for life after college?
Yeah, so a lot of our students go to graduate school. Some of them go to medical school. A few of them go to law school. Many of them, as I said, go on fellowships, or they go on their Fulbright, or they go on their Watson. I think that one of the things that's really unique about a Scripps education is because it's grounded in the liberal arts and because it emphasizes interdisciplinarity, our students are really not reined in by boxes or limits. So when some of our students are going off now to work for Google and Amazon, and what they've told me is that they're appreciated at those places, not just because they have computer science or data science skills, which they do, but because they have a liberal arts background and they can communicate with people and they can understand people who may not have a CS background. And so they're actually appreciated, hired, and promoted because of their humanities background and because of their interdisciplinarity, because they can write, because they can speak, because they can clearly enunciate points that are well thought out and convince people why doing something in one way or another is important in ways that maybe students who didn't have that type of broad education are more challenged to do. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's so critical. You know, one of the questions that we actually have is just talking about some of the impending concerns about the economy and what is going to happen when students graduate. And what you just talked about related to the skills that our students leave with of critical thinking and clear communicating, that's going to be valid, I would imagine, across just about every industry. And so as we're thinking about that, yes, it's the things you can put on your resume, but I would imagine too that from what you see when you're working with students, it's also how they can communicate and go out into the world.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's something, again, that I didn't fully appreciate until I came to Scripps College and realized that I had been focusing on something very closely and I might have been very good at it, but that there was a lot that I was missing that was outside my peripheral vision. And that those are important ideas, and having that sense of history or a sense of experience or a sense of what happens in other countries and why it's valid to look at other countries and why it's valid to look at history and why having a sense of perspective is going to get us through this is really, really important. Yeah.
So we have some great questions. Is there anything else that you wanted to share before we hop into that, or do you feel ready to go with some of the questions from our attendees?
I think I'm ready to go with the questions. I think I talked fast.
And we know, I mean, you have a snack now from your son who like popped into your Zoom meeting, so you're ready to go. So one of the questions that is here, which I think is a great place to start, is just if a student knows that they want to do research or they're interested in a fellowship, how does that process start, and who are they talking to as they're considering, is it right for me to start research after my first year? Am I really passionate about something? What is a student's journey like as they're starting to consider doing research?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's two people you would want to identify. One is easy because it's me. And so me. So I would help you seek out funding for this opportunity. The second would be your faculty research mentor, would be the person that's really going to be working with you on this project. And this could be somebody who you had in Core 1, who was your professor, or you had in another class, or maybe somebody you haven't had a class with, but you read on the website what their research project is, and you're really excited about that. And so if you meet with me, I can help you approach that person. I mean, faculty are approached all the time just by cold emails and say, hi, I'm a Scripps first year, and I'm really excited about what you do. And I haven't had a class with you yet, but I really want to major in your subject. And I'm wondering if you're taking research students this summer, if you're mentoring research students this summer, and can I come and talk to you? Or you can just show up to their office hours, which are posted online, and have that conversation in person, which also works well. And so those would be the two pieces that you would want to get into play.
Wonderful. And we've talked in a couple different sessions and throughout the admission journey about the required senior thesis at Scripps, which often has a research component to it. When do students decide on a thesis topic, and how do we celebrate thesis? I think that might be a fun thing to share in terms of traditions at Scripps.
Oh, of course. How do students decide on a thesis topic? So I think often it comes out of a class they've taken. So your thesis comes out of your major, and different departments run thesis in different ways. Sometimes there's a seminar or a thesis class, sometimes there's not. But generally your topic is something that you love and are inspired by. And it's generally something you've learned about in a class, or it could be related to summer research that you've done. You are not expected to have identified your thesis topic in your first year or your second year or your third year. So it's something that often is not identified until the summer before your senior year or that beginning of the fall semester. And sometimes identifying the topic and identifying the questions you want to address is the hardest part. And that can take some amount of time before you really know what you want to focus on. And so sometimes the summer before your senior year, or even the first part of the fall semester of your senior year, you're doing literature reviews and trying to figure out what is the edge of the envelope in terms of knowledge of this topic. Because what we're trying to do as scholars in the academy is to create new knowledge. And before you can create new knowledge, you have to know where the knowledge ends. So you find, you read the literature, you figure out what are people thinking, what are scholars thinking, what do we currently know? And then you hit that point when you're like, and there's nothing more. And so now I know where I can begin. And so that's when you begin asking questions and saying, how do I push this further? And that's something that comes end of junior year, summer before senior year, senior year. And the students work really hard on their thesis in the fall or in the spring or in the whole year. Totally depends. It's different for different disciplines. Then we celebrate all of this hard work at something called Capstone Day, which is what I've been working on this week right now. And so Capstone Day is when students come together and they present their theses. When we're in person, they do this in short talks in our beautiful Humanities building, which I think we can show you a picture. We have a picture. I don't even know if we have a picture of the Humanities building, but it's a beautiful building. And it lasts the whole day. There's concurrent sessions. People go and see when their friends are speaking. They present their theses, and it's amazing. There's music performances. We have posters for the athletes. We have a special lunch. There's a soccer game at the end of the day. Wonderful. This year we're doing something special because we're obviously not together at this point. So our seniors are working hard on making short videos that will be like little TEDx talks. And those will be online and accessible. And the great thing about this actually is Capstone Day now we're sort of gonna like lift the veil. Normally Capstone Day is only accessible to people at Scripps. This year it's going to be accessible to people at Scripps and anybody who can click a link on a computer. And so families can watch it, friends can watch it. It's going to be much more accessible and inclusive this year. So we're really actually quite excited about that.
And our admitted students could watch some if they want to, right? If they're interested.
Absolutely. You will all be invited.
Wonderful. And if anyone is interested in just seeing what past senior thesis topics have been, because that is obviously that big culminating research that students have done, just reach out to me. They're all archived in the Claremont College's library. And so it's really neat just to see the breadth and scope of what our students are studying. And some of it is very precise and very specific, and others is much more expansive and broad. And so I think if students want concrete examples of those, that can be a really, really helpful resource. So just reach out to me and I can send you the link for that. A question of how you get notified about Capstone Day. So if you're following Scripps Admission on Instagram, we'll be posting out the links of how to access all of that. So just make sure that you're keeping an eye on that or on the virtual student hub. So one of the questions was back to research, and I think sometimes for admitted students, Jennifer, the idea of research and
not only
that's fine.
Me food, he brought me the dog and the cat. So,
so you have a little menagerie of animals and little people. I love it. So when I think for students and for families of admitted students, often the idea of research and internships goes hand in hand. Mm-hmm. For students, I'm sure that students come to you sometimes and say, well, I might want to do research on this, but I also may want to do an internship in this area. Do you work with the career planning office on internships? Are students finding them on their own? What does that process look like in terms of your involvement of anything related to internships and where they hit with research?
That's a great question. So an internship is really more of something where you're going to work with an organization and you're stepping into their world and helping them with their work. A research project is something that comes from you that you're creating, that's often done in parallel or in collaboration with a faculty member. And so those are sort of the ways that I think about them in terms of internship versus research project. And you're right, internships are run through Career Planning and Resources. My role in that is I sit on the committee that funds those. And obviously when students are interested in internships, I send them over to Career Planning and Resources. And otherwise, that's the extent of my involvement. My dog sneezed.
And one of the things I love, Jennifer, is something you just said, which is this idea of us being a small community. And so you know the people who work in career planning, you know where to direct students where maybe they come to you thinking, oh, maybe I want to do research, but you realize like, no, you really want to do more of an internship. So that idea of us working closely together across departments and divisions to best meet the needs of our students, I think is something that's really special about Scripps.
And it really depends on the major. There's some majors and careers that would come out of that where an internship is what you want to do and what you really need to do in order to gain employment in that field. And
Right.
so there's other disciplines and majors where actually research is what they're looking for. And it could be science or it could be the humanities. But it depends really on what the student wants to do. And so again, it's completely individualized.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So when we're thinking about research, maybe both in science and then in other areas, are students only doing research in the summer, or are there opportunities for students to engage in research activities throughout the academic year?
Oh, that's a great question. No, throughout the academic year. So students sometimes do research on a volunteer basis, sometimes they get paid, or sometimes they do it as an independent study and get course credit for that research. And so we have students who are involved in psychology projects, for example. They do research all year. We have a lot of science students who do research all year. And this is in addition to their senior thesis. So this is research they might be doing as a first year or a second year or a third year. Absolutely.
Wonderful. And you find that that research is usually driven by a class that they've taken or a faculty member who they've built a relationship, and then they think, oh, that's really where I would start my research journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And different types of research are more or less connected and intertwined with a faculty member's research. If you're interested, for example, in organic chemistry, it's not likely that you're going to just devise your own project and do it completely independently, because you're not going to do that. You're going to be in the laboratory, working with the chemicals there, working under the guidance of the faculty member. If you're working on a project that requires mutant fruit flies or something, you're also not going to be just working on that on your own in your dorm room. You're going to be collaborating with the professor. However, there's other projects, the humanities projects, social science projects, where the project really can be more driven from the student and can be almost not connected at all to the faculty's own scholarship, but the faculty member is still serving as a resource and as a mentor to that student's research project.
So going back to core, I know that you taught in core 1 a little while ago, and then you taught in core 2. From those experiences of teaching in that interdisciplinary environment, how have you seen, or do you have some examples of the type of research that students have taken on from the classes that you worked with them in, or the types of research when you were maybe not so much in your associate dean of faculty role, but more in your professor of biology role, of how research really was informed by those core courses, or maybe just intro courses in general?
Yeah, so in science, if they once they begin with introductory biology or introductory chemistry, and then usually a common class to be taken next is genetics, which I taught for years. And so oftentimes when students would be in genetics, they'd realize, I like this, I like genetics, I love thinking about genotypes all day. And so they would then approach me and ask, do you have any space in your laboratory to do a genetics project? And so it would come out of those types of conversations. Other times they'd read a paper in our class. In our classes, we read a lot of primary literature, so work done actually by scholars, and they would read a paper and get very excited about it and want to do something along the lines of that paper. In my Core 2 Disability Studies class, the end of that class, we have a project where students propose a grant proposal as if they were seeking money to change something about Scripps's campus to make it more accessible. So it could be the physical campus, it could be the way we deliver the classes, it could be an accommodation. And so they interview the appropriate people and they write this proposal. And often what comes out of that is an independent study. One actually affected how CP&R was able to tag internships, so students could tell if an internship was accessible or not. So some of these projects actually came true in real life, which is really quite exciting.
And again, I think that speaks to Scripps being a place that's smaller and more community oriented, where we know each other and we're talking about things together, and in the classroom, out of the classroom, it's all kind of becomes one community.
Right. I mean, so behind me is Sycamore Court, and this is, I don't remember if I said this, this is where my office is. So when Scripps reopens, you'll come to this courtyard to find me, and I'm just over here in that direction. And Laura, you're in, we call it Seal Court, which I have no idea why, because it's a fountain with sea lions. And again, more animals. Sorry. told my son, but behind you is career planning and resources.
Mm-hmm.
And to the left is the Motley, which is the student-run coffee shop, and then the bookstore, the post office. Everything is really close, and everybody knows everybody, and which is wonderful, because then we know how to get you the resources that you need. And you don't have to go through a lot of names or figure out who to contact. You contact one person and we will get you to the right people. Yeah.
So speaking of resources, obviously I would imagine that applying for fellowships involves a lot of writing and preparation. How does, like, I guess you or the college sort of support students' written preparation for fellowships, and then also preparation for any type of interviews or other in-person activities that are related to fellowship applications?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. So that again relies on partnerships. So as your fellowship advisor and the associate dean, I'm one person, but I'm working collaboratively with all of Scripps. And so I collaborate closely with the Writing Center. So we have two amazing writing professionals in the Writing Center. They have just run 3 weekly workshops on writing a personal statement. So right after spring break, when we came back from spring break, they were going to run in-person sessions. So we've moved them to Zoom, of course, but they ran sessions on how to write a personal statement. And so they're working closely with students. They meet with them one-on-one. Career planning and resources, which again is right over your right shoulder, also will help students write personal statements, and they will help students with their resumes, with their CVs. They will do practice interviews. They will record the interviews so you can see what you do in an interview. And so students will meet with me. We'll talk about what's the right avenue. I will also read drafts once they start deciding what they're going to apply to and once they start writing copies. And so when you write a fellowship, I tell many students, it's going to be read by people around the country. If it's a Fulbright, it's going to be read by people in other countries. And so you have no idea what these people are bringing to the table when they're reading your application. They don't know what you know. They're not in your head. You need to get your ideas across to almost anybody. And so as you're writing this fellowship application, it's really helpful if you get as many eyes on it as you can. And so I'll edit it, the Writing Center, Career Planning and Resources, your friends, your faculty. And we go through draft upon draft. Really many, many, many drafts is what it takes to get these very prestigious fellowships. But it works at Scripps College because we're all working together as a team to help the students.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And are students usually applying for fellowships then during their senior year? Are there any fellowships that folks are applying for before that time?
Yeah, so I didn't bring my cheat sheet. Students can apply for fellowships as early as the end of their first year. They can apply to study abroad in the United Kingdom for a summer. They can apply for, in their second year, if they're interested in pursuing a PhD and going into academics in certain approved topics, they can apply for a Mellon Mays undergraduate fellowship, and that's only available to sophomores because it provides 2 summers and 2 academic years of funding. They can apply for the Strauss, which is to create a grassroots projects for social change. That can be applied for in any year. And then as a senior, of course, many of our students apply for Fulbrights and for the Watson. Davis Project for Peace is another one that you can apply for at various times. So it's really something I encourage students in their first year, either in the fall or the spring, to come to an information session. So several times over the semester, I run fellowship information sessions where I go through all the fellowships, what's open, what you might think about looking at. And that's, even if you're not going to apply that month, it's something you can just put away in the back of your head and think, okay, maybe I'll think about that when I'm a junior. Then when you're a junior, you remember there was something I was supposed to think about. So you come back and you go to another information session. You say, oh yeah, that was it. I remember. Then you come and meet with me and we go over the details. And you think about who are the best people to ask for letters of recommendation from. How should I formulate this personal statement? What should I write about as my project? And then we start doing all of the work.
That's wonderful. Well, I think we are pretty close to being wrapped up with our questions. The only one that is still sitting out there is just one more question about thesis and how it relates to research. And you've been at Scripps for a long time, and you've been a professor here and have worked with a lot of students. When we think about thesis and more broadly students' research, do you find that students tend to just dive into topics that they love, or is it something that they think, well, this is going to drive me to a career or professional school or something? How does that process work of where our students usually land with maybe later in college research, thesis, or other related research that they might be doing?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is just follow your gut. So, pardon me. I don't know why I was told, please don't interrupt me. So instead I got food and all the animals. Sometimes students do a project and they think, I want to be a geneticist. And they come and they work in my lab and they realize, I don't want to be a geneticist. Like, this isn't for, I want to study English. I want to be an English major. This is a true story. And so the student comes to me and they say, I think I want to be an English major. And I say, wonderful. And so they go off and they become an English major and they pursue that. Other times they want to be an English major and decide, no, I really want to be a geneticist or something else. So it's perfectly common for students to start on one path, get a research experience, and decide, maybe this isn't what I want to do. And that knowledge is so valuable, because this is what you're trying to do for 4 years, is figure out, what do you want to do? You don't know. And there's no wrong choices. Every choice you make informs you, and every choice you make teaches you things. So life is not like a direct path, right? As they say, you're going to go here and you're going to learn all sorts of things. And you're going to go here and you're going to learn all sorts of things. And then you're going to come back and eventually land somewhere beautiful.
And when we talk to students about choosing a liberal arts college, and especially a women's college, so many of our admitted students have been really high achieving high school students. And the idea of having multiple interests and wanting to explore those in research and fellowships and academic scholarship, having a lot of interest, we think at Scripps is a great thing. That doesn't mean you're any less serious about your interests because you don't know exactly what you want to be when you grow up. So I think that's a wonderful note to end on, Jennifer, of follow your path. It may include research and fellowships, and you may end up somewhere that you're not even expecting. So,
absolutely.
So, all right. Well, thank you. Oh my gosh, this cat has brought me so much joy to this webinar. I hope it has made everyone else laugh as much as it has made me laugh.
Thrilled to be here. Again, I was told, please keep the room quiet.
Of course.
I got.
And so for everyone who's attending, if you have a question that maybe we didn't answer specifically how you wanted, or you need more information, please do feel free to reach out. My information is on the Virtual Admitted Student Hub. I can connect you with Jennifer if you have specific questions for her. And we wish you all the best as you make your decision about whether or not to come to Scripps. So thanks again, Jennifer.
It was my pleasure. And I just want to say congratulations to everybody. And I look forward to meeting you all in person. And we are all here for you.
Thank you again. Have a great day, everyone.